You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Welcome back in to Sons of the Shoe. Another episode underway as we help preview the national championship game coming up on Monday. It feels like it's taking forever to get there. The suspense is killing me. I'm sure it's killing many of you as well. But looking forward to the game, and we're going to preview the game a little bit deeper than we did the first conversation we had this week. And we have a special guest to help us in that feat as well. Do want to remind you real quick, though, to like, follow, subscribe, review the Sons of the Shoe podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the Odyssey app. Did I mention Apple Podcasts as well? Don't forget about it. And at the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel, where you can see the podcast and watch it as well. And jump in the comment section to share any thoughts, questions, whatever you might have about anything that we discuss on the show. But as I said, we get you ready for Notre Dame, Ohio State. Just a few days away now, and all of us very excited about what's coming up here on Monday night, a chance to play for a national championship. And to help us do just that, I want to welcome in a friend, a former, I'll say colleague, even though I was kind of I don't want to say I was his boss, but I kind of was somebody, a mentor of some sort to him, a superior to him in terms of when he was in college. We were working, and he was a student working at a radio station at John Carroll University, where we crossed paths. A good dude all around, and he does a tremendous job covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for On3. Kyle Kelly stopping by the show, making his Sons of the Shoe debut. Kyle, appreciate you coming on, my man. I enjoy catching up with you as always. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, during my time at John Carroll, I always aspired to be on 92 Through the Fan one day, but I would have never imagined that would have been covering Notre Dame football. So I'll take it either way. It's good to see you, Spencer. We've done plenty of these before. It's been a few years, but it's going to be good to catch up and talk about a pretty big game on Monday night in Atlanta.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I am curious from your perspective, like the road to get here for Notre Dame, because we've obviously documented very well the road here for Ohio State and the ups and downs of that, the loss to Michigan, feeling like it was going to derail everything. And now they're somehow here. And what I think is so interesting about this matchup is it kind of is two teams that had similar paths in that way. Like Notre Dame loses to NIU, and everyone's like, this team's fraudulent. There's no way they're going to make the college football playoff. Like they got no shot. You know, everyone thinks that they're not very good. There's questions about Marcus Freeman's job security. Just what changed, or what have you seen as this team has gone on throughout the season that allowed them to get to a point where they went from that low of lows, the loss to NIU, to then becoming a team that has a legitimate chance to win a national championship?
Yeah, the theme under Marcus Freeman in his 3 years at Notre Dame as head coach is this team really has not handled success well. Going throughout the past, some of his, past seasons at Notre Dame, and to start this year. And Marcus Freeman has talked about it a lot, that here in year 3, when they beat Texas A&M week 1, that was the first time in his tenure that they had ever won the big game early. They played Ohio State in 2022. They lost. They started the 2023 season with some pretty easy tune-up opponents, Navy, Tennessee State, Central Michigan. Lost to Ohio State on the 23rd of September in week 3. But then they go out to College Station and win in prime time in front of the entire country, go down to SEC country and win a game in the Lone Star State. And that was a big win for this program. They did not handle success the right way, though. They were unprepared, unfocused against NIU, and they lost. And we've seen that loss before under Marcus Freeman. In his first year, he lost to Marshall. Then he lost to Stanford a couple weeks later in the 2022 season. That Stanford team, believe it or not, might have been worse than Marshall. They were one of the worst teams in the Power 5 during that year. But the thing that worked in Notre Dame's favor this season is that even though they don't handle success very well, or they hadn't handled success really well during the Marcus Freeman era, is they responded to adversity very well under Marcus Freeman. And I'll tell you what, it was never going to get more adverse than losing to NIU in week 2 at home in your home opener, where everyone was talking about you being 12-0 and being an absolute lock for that number 5 seed, which was the highest seed Notre Dame could get in the college football playoff, national championship talk, all that. But they it went to their heads a little bit too much. But like I said, they have been very successful when their backs are against the wall. Ever since that NIU game, it's been like they're playing for a playoff, like they're in a playoff scenario because they've had to win out. Maybe it looks a little bit differently now, but at that time, to start the season, it wasn't a certainty that a 2-loss Notre Dame team could make the college football playoff. But the goal at the start of this year was always to host a college football team. To host a college football playoff home game at Notre Dame Stadium, and then to win one of the major bowl games, which they have in 3 decades. They've surpassed all that, and now they're playing for a national championship against Ohio State.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this, because you bring up Marcus Freeman, and similarly, again, the parallels between these teams I think are pretty interesting because I think there's been a lot of the same sort of banter about the head coach for both these programs at times this year. Maybe more recently with Ryan Day because the Michigan loss wasn't so long ago. And it's funny, like I was on this very show saying if they're going to fire Ryan Day, the person I want is Marcus Freeman because I think Marcus Freeman is a tremendous coach, and obviously he's got the Ohio State background. How have you seen the narrative and the conversation change around Marcus Freeman during this run and throughout this season as well?
Yeah, I mean, for them to go from obviously losing that NIU game to just rallying off win after win after win. I mean, right away when they played Purdue week 3 the following week, Notre Dame won that game 66-7, and right away it kind of looked like that NIU loss was in the rearview mirror. But like even then, like at the certain points of the season, like when they were winning games in October and even winning games in early November, like national championship never, like playing in the national championship game never felt like a realistic possibility. It really wasn't until probably the end of the year, and then when they go out and beat Indiana, that we saw Notre Dame and kind of their path that they had in the college football playoff as a legit possibility to make the national championship game. I know some of the national analysts were starting to project Notre Dame in the college football playoff final because you looked at their path and, hey, if they beat Indiana, then they play Georgia. But guess what? Georgia doesn't have their starting quarterback. So that's a win for Notre Dame. Gives them maybe a little bit of an advantage. I think they even were listed at one point as a favorite going into that game against Georgia, which you never would have thought early on in the season. And then, everyone knows what Penn State path was. I mean, they dismantled SMU, who wasn't ready to play up north in round 1, faced a group of 5 team in group 2. And I think a lot of people felt that if Notre Dame played Penn State, that's a game that Notre Dame could probably win. They took care of business down in Miami. And, the path to get here, even though it wasn't as easy as, say, a Penn State, it was still pretty favorable to Notre Dame. And this team is playing at a championship level right now, and they continually find ways to win. And Marcus Freeman's been a really big part of that. Like in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, he outcoached Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
You look back at some of those games, some of the plays in those games, and the most notable one being when Marcus Freeman puts his offense out on the field in the fourth quarter against Georgia, and they're backed up in their own territory on their own 10-yard line. It's like 4th and 4, whatever it was, and he sends his offense out on the field. Then he switches the punt team out there, caused a lot of chaos for Georgia. He gets the first down, extends a drive, and that drive ended up being over 7 minutes long, chewed up the entire latter half of the fourth quarter, and that helped Notre Dame beat Georgia to get to the Orange Bowl. And then when you look at the Orange Bowl, Notre Dame didn't need any extra fuel or added motivation, but Marcus Freeman had a press conference with James Franklin, Penn State's coach, and I think he kind of felt slighted by some of the comments that Franklin made when talking about, like, just jokingly about his hairline, and then asking Marcus during the press conference about how old he is and things like that. Like it all seemed like friendly banter in the moment, but that was a team that didn't need any bulletin board material. Notre Dame's playing like they're bulletproof right now, but they got it against James Franklin. So they've just been finding ways to continually win. Marcus Freeman's been at the forefront of that. They don't need any added motivation, but they're starting to get it, and that's even kind of coming to light this week because everyone's asking about, hey, Notre Dame, the first two versions of Ohio State versus Notre Dame the last 2 years, Freeman and Day, like Notre Dame lost those games.
Yeah.
But pretty much the entire narrative coming out of Notre Dame right now is like, if you aren't motivated to play a national championship game, regardless of the opponent, like you're not meant to be here. So I think they'll be prepared. They might be a little bit overmatched in the talent department. But Marcus Freeman company, they're the best in the country against covering the spread. So I think it's going to be a pretty close game regardless.
Yeah, and you bring up the previous two meetings. I know that's something that Jeremiah Love is sort of talked about. He was asked straight up, like, who do you want to play? And he said Ohio State, like he wants another shot at them. Well, he's going to get it. And you bring up the talent difference here, just how loaded Ohio State obviously is on that front. From your standpoint, like, and maybe actually, let me go here first, because I do think, like, watching that Texas game, as I'm sure you were intently to sort of see what opponent was coming down the pike here for Notre Dame. Do you think they laid out the blueprint of how to at least make this game interesting? Because they did the best job of anybody at trying to take away Jeremiah Smith and basically say, like, Will Howard's got to beat us with anybody else. Is that the path forward you think that Notre Dame also should be trying to follow?
If it's not that, it'll be the way Michigan beat them against Ohio State to close out the regular season. Like, I'm sure you guys have probably talked about ad nauseum by now about Chip Kelly and Ryan Day deciding to, rather than trying to beat Michigan through the air, but instead running it into Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham time and time again and getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage, how that was unsuccessful for Ohio State. And obviously they haven't tried to do that in the college football playoff. They've just beaten teams in every which way they can. But I wonder if Notre Dame is kind of going to try to play that game a little bit similarly to the way Michigan did. There was a lot of commotion coming out of the last game, obviously, where Ryan Day felt like his team wasn't, considered a tough team because of Lou Holtz's comments. And there was a whole narrative that Notre Dame was going to out-physical them the way Michigan had the previous 2 years. But, like, that's the identity of the Notre Dame football team. Like, they are physical, they are aggressive, they are violent. Marcus Freeman, like, he takes to heart, like, having a physical, violent football team. And I'm not sure how Ohio State's exactly responded to that in the college football playoff. You would know better than me, but it seems like they are firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
But I think Notre Dame's a team that can line up against Ohio State and kind of punch them in the mouth a little bit. They're not going to devise away from their game plan. Like, at this point, Notre Dame's passing offense is what it is. It's in the bottom third of the country. They're like 103rd in the nation. Their wide receivers they don't get much production out of them. Like, under Marcus Freeman, in his 3 years as head coach, only 5 times have they had a 100-yard wide receiver. And 2 of those times were in the Fiesta Bowl when he was that was his first game in 2020, the end of the 2021 season after Brian Kelly left. And another time was last game against Penn State with Jaden Greathouse. So they're not going to be a team that throws the ball. Marcus Freeman always talks about Notre Dame being an offensive line and defensive line driven program. They're going to try to run the football with Jeremiah Love, Jared Darian Price, especially Riley Leonard, who's been successful against the run. And then on defense, Notre Dame is pretty well noted at this point of being a team that runs a ton of man coverage. They don't run a lot of zone. They have the personnel to be able to go against your wide receivers and tend to shut them down. And even against Ohio State in the past, like Marvin Harrison Jr. the last 2 years did nothing against Notre Dame. I know either did Jackson Smith and Jigba the 1 year he played.
Yeah.
It's been Emeka Ibuka, the one that's beat Notre Dame a little bit. So I think Notre Dame is like they're going to stay true to their identity during this game. And I mean, at halftime, it could be up to some adjustments from that coaching staff to maybe change some things. But I see them staying true to themselves and trying to do what got them here. And whatever the outcome is, the outcome is.
It's funny you mention playing like Michigan because Jake and I have talked about this the last couple rounds of the playoff. Like, I don't know that that's even really replicable unless Notre Dame comes out and they have like the wing logo on the helmet. Like they change their color. They don't even really have to change their color scheme all that much. It's similar, right? Like I like, and it's funny though because it does feel like their way of trying to get everybody I think understands at this point that Ohio State is a different team than what they were in Michigan. But if you can trick them into playing that style, that gives you the best chance to win. And you bring up like some of the comments made the last time they played. Already, it feels like there are people who are trying to goad them into Ryan Day into playing that style again. I know Brady Quinn had some comments about like Ryan Day. It's easy to get under his skin. I know Lou Holtz has like tweeted about who he thinks is going to win. He's kind of getting back into this fire here, which I don't even think anybody's heard from Lou Holtz since that game last year when he made those comments. Then Ryan Day called him out. So I think it's kind of funny that Notre Dame's taking that approach, but it does kind of lean into, if Notre Dame can sort of get in Ohio State's head, that mental warfare part of the game, maybe it gives them the best chance to win and kind of level the playing field on Monday.
Yeah, it might, but Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, they don't buy into any of that stuff.
Right.
Marcus Freeman's all about this team glory, and shutting all the noise off outside the locker room. And meanwhile, inside the locker room, he's got right now a running loop of Notre Dame against Ohio State last year on the TVs in the locker room. I'm pretty sure trying to remind the players what happened last year, even though they're all saying that the opponent doesn't really matter. It's the game that matters most. So that's an interesting kind of motivation tactic there from Freeman. But yeah, this team's just really been focused on itself the entire way. Like you look at what happened down in New Orleans and the terrorist attacks and the tragedy that occurred and how they responded to that. It's just like simple things like that. Like to see that Notre Dame has just been able to respond to adversity really well this year and just put their headphones on and limit all the outside noise. So I don't, even though Jeremiah Love comes out after the game and says we want Ohio State and things like that, I don't think they're buying into what the conversation is really outside the walls of South Bend. And everyone's going to be talking about Marcus Freeman again playing his former team and things like that. But they're just ready to go. I know they're grateful for this opportunity to play in a national championship. And yeah, it's gonna be a hell of a ball game. I'm really looking forward to covering it, and I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, I do hope no matter what happens, that after the game, we either get another epic Ryan Day rant where he's taking a shot at Lou Holtz, or on the flip side, Marcus Freeman just lets loose and takes a shot at Brian Kelly and says, I want to know where Brian Kelly is right now. It won't happen. It won't happen.
It will not happen.
But I would love if that did, because honestly, the best part about Notre Dame being in this game is all the strays being thrown Brian Kelly's way. Last thing to get us out of here, Kyle, we like to ask our guests this when we've kind of been previewing these matchups, because we know obviously Ohio State comes in. They're, I think, a 10-point favorite in Vegas right now, and people are sort of feeling like Ohio State's got the edge here. But as we kind of talked about with this matchup, I'll throw this one at you. Notre Dame wins if fill in the blank.
They got to win the turnover battle. That's the big thing. Notre Dame usually doesn't win, as don't most teams, when they lose the turnover battle. And ironically, they lost the turnover battle against Penn State in the Orange Bowl, but they still found a way to come away with a victory there. But that's a big thing. They're going to have to force Will Howard to make a couple of mistakes. And obviously, they're going to have to slow down the wide receivers. They're going to have to hold that Ohio State offense to a manageable output on the stat sheet one way or another. And the big thing will be on offense is they just got to be able to continue to run the football. It sounds cliche, but that's what's got them here all year. They're a little banged up on the offensive line right now. Going to have a new starter at left tackle, so that'll be something to watch. But if Notre Dame can't run the football, it's going to get pretty challenging for them because I know Ohio State's got the number one pass defense, and I cited some of the statistics that Notre Dame has earlier in the show from a passing aspect. So, yeah, the three things for me are just forcing the turnovers, managing a reasonable output against that Ohio State offense, and just being able to successfully run the football.
He's Kyle Kelly, does a tremendous job covering Notre Dame, largely as their football recruiting reporter, but obviously been following every step of this college football playoff run, the run of the national championship, and he does all that for On3. You can follow him on X @by Kyle Kelly. We appreciate you, Kyle. Very, very grateful to you. And I hope we get to cross paths down the line again, talking about more Ohio State, Notre Dame matchups, maybe next year in the college football playoff. We'll see.
That would be a pleasure. I'm excited for this matchup, and I will take it as many of them as we can as long as I do this job.
Awesome, man. Kyle Kelly, big thanks to you.